is as a seller, if you don't want or need all the money right now, you can get more. So it's, do you want less now by selling conventionally, or do you want to get more later? Doesn't work for everyone, but for the folks that don't need it now, you can get more and a lot more. And if you own your house, Sam, free and clear, which is 1/3 of all houses in the United States, you can get way more if you sell on seller financing.
Are you about to start a podcast or producing a podcast and tired of doing the editing yourself? We have produced over 1,000 daily shows, and the production team that I've created, they're now available to produce shows for you as well. We can do as little or as much as you need, from finding and communicating with guests, preparing introductions, to editing the audio and video. You will sound better, have a more professional presence, and be able to spend your time doing other valuable tasks on your business. Let me know you're interested by emailing me directly at whitney@lifebridgecapital.com.
Welcome to another episode of the Daily Real Estate Syndication Show. I'm your host, Sam Rust. Joining us today is Bryan O'Neill. Bryan is an experienced real estate investor and business owner who specializes in providing flexible real estate solutions for both buyers and sellers in the greater Chicagoland area and beyond. Bryan and his wife, Katie, have experienced some of the common challenges of selling their own home and know that there had to be a better way, which led him to start BKW Property Solutions. Currently lives in Chicago with his son and loving wife. Bryan, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Sam. Appreciate the intro. Great to be here. Looking forward to chatting with you.
So, Bryan, I did a little bit of LinkedIn sleuthing, and you've got a rich history in sales. And I noticed your last stop before starting your own property firm was Alamat Group. You were in elevator sales. There's got to be a story in there. How does a salesman 20 years in get the real estate bug? And not only the real estate bug, go and start your own brokerage firm.
Wow, that's a great question. So I was in sales for 25 years, like right out of college. I did what we were all trained to do, go to school, get a good job. And, hopefully you can save enough money and retire, at 65 or whatever the appropriate age is, right? So I got into sales because I thought it was a great way to make money. I actually started working for Enterprise, a rent-a-car company. And, they had a great management training program. I worked with them for a little bit. And then I ultimately got hired by this elevator company doing sales for them. Again, nothing related to real estate. And what I found was I was doing heavy travel, right? So when you become an entrepreneur, you always have to have a reason why you want to leave the W-2 world and start your own thing. And for me, it was, I was gone 3 out of 4 weeks every month. I was flying 100,000 miles a year. I was all over the place. I had a young son, and I did not want to miss him growing up. As he got older, he started to tell me about it. Like, hey, Dad, I don't like when you leave. I'm scared when you're gone. That started to chip away at me as he got older and started to voice his opinion. And that led me to start thinking about, okay, I got to get out of this. That coupled with the fact that I had always wanted to do something in real estate. I had a passion for real estate. I just didn't know how to start my own business. I was too scared, and it felt safe, right? It feels safe to get a paycheck, to have health benefits, to be taken care of. You feel comfortable. And then ultimately my income, even in sales, like it plateaus. You can only earn so much unless you're going to start trading time for dollars, which is, I'd have to climb up the corporate ladder. I'd probably have to fly 150,000 miles a year. I'd never see my family. That's not worth it. So I decided to dive into real estate. I was actually looking at trying to buy multifamily properties. I was looking at syndication, right? And I ran around for about a year and a half trying to find deals. I even acted like a real estate investor. I looked at properties. I even made a couple of offers, but I really never did anything serious because I was too scared. I didn't know what I was doing. I was too scared to invest my own money. And more importantly, I was too scared to ask other people to invest alongside of me for failure. It's right around that time where I heard my mentor talking about buying properties using creative financing strategies, no money down, no credit. I ran right to it. And ultimately I started my own business. And 9 months later, I left that job.
Oh, that's fantastic. As part of your story, You mentioned in several different places that I've seen that you and your wife were getting ready to sell a home and you thought you were going to make 40 grand and it ended up being 4 grand. And I'm guessing that that's part of your passion for real estate and why you ended up heading there. Is that story, realizing over time that you could have done better? It was almost like a dog with a bone situation is how I picture it. It's just that drop gnawed at you. You're like, there's got to be a better way. And when you solved it, you wanted to take that idea to the marketplace. Could you walk us through that story a little bit?
Yeah. And it still hurts talking about it now. I mean, I've come to terms with it, but that was a very real thing. So we had a personal experience with it. This is back in 14, before we bought the house that we lived in now. And we went through a conventional sale. So we had a new build. We're buying a brand new house. We committed to it. You got to put money down. You got to give the builder money. And then it takes 10 months to build. So then we're trying to sell our existing house. And we're trying to line everything up and time it perfectly. Like, hey, we'll sell this house and we'll move right into the new one. Well, that never works out. And I remember we hired a realtor, the first one that was referred to us, which was a mistake. We made a bunch of mistakes, right? And this is one of the reasons we do what we do, is to educate people. Because this is like the most important decision that most people ever make in their life, dealing with their home, in terms of a financial commitment and an emotional commitment. The emotional piece being much more significant than the financial piece, right? So we're selling the house. We're trying to sell it. We started at this really high number. A lot of people do this. Like, the realtor tried to tell us what the house was worth. I said, no, it's worth this. So I'm telling the person I hired how to do her job, right? And she said, okay, we'll listen for that. Sure enough, nobody bites. And then we do what everybody else does. We're lowering the price. We're lowering the price until somebody finally says, hey, I'll buy it at that number. And that's where the 40, after we paid everyone, like we paid the realtor, we paid the closing costs, we paid the tax prorations, like we got left over with the scraps, right? And I remember I said to my wife at the closing table, we were supposed to get 40, we got 4. I could have done that. Like, I seriously could have done that. Like, nobody did anything special here. We just paid a bunch of people to like move paper around. And that's ultimately what kind of drove me to start this business, because I knew that there had to be a better way to do it. I didn't know it at the time, what it was. I do know now, but that's really that personal experience and that pain is what kind of led me to what we're doing now, buying homes creatively.
I appreciate you sharing that. I love those seminal moments where it's just like, there has to be a better way. And almost every entrepreneur I've ever met has one of those stories that drives them forward. That was the genesis for where they are today. So Appreciate you sharing that. You mentioned in your website at BKW Property Solutions a lot about lease to own, rent to own. And then you talk about the pros and cons of selling with an investor versus a realtor. Now, I haven't spent a ton of time in single family, but I've bought several homes and have helped friends buy homes and have some broad familiarity. I know that there's the realtor path. If you listen to the professionals, you probably do well. There's also FBO, you can sell by owner. But I haven't heard a lot of people talk about this middle road, or maybe not even a middle road, a third point in the triangle that you're advocating. Could you talk a little bit about what it means to sell with an investor?
Correct. So, and specifically selling on terms, because that's what we do here at BKW. We buy properties on what's referred to as terms. You can use the word seller financing or creative financing. And really who this is a great fit for is someone like me. I didn't need the money, right? I didn't need the $40,000 to buy my next house. I was approved for both loans. What my pain was, I could not afford 2 mortgages, 2 housing payments. Like, I committed to this house. I gave them a bunch of money. I had to move. That, like, there was no undoing that. So it was, I had to pay 2 housing payments. And that's why we continue to lower the price. I left that part out in the story. So that's a lot of people in the United States. They may not be specific to my situation, but they're faced with 2 housing payments. Like, they got relocated, they had to move, whatever the situation, they got to get out of this house and can't afford it. So what they do is they lower the price, even though they know it might be worth more. I got all this equity. Well, I can help Bryan from 7 years ago keep his 40 grand, and I'll pay his monthly payments every month to the bank as long as he doesn't need it right now. If he can wait for it, I can get more. And that's what we talk about when we're doing seller financing. And the term structure or lease option is, as a seller, if you don't want or need all the money right now, you can get more. So it's, do you want less now by selling conventionally, or do you want to get more later? Doesn't work for everyone, but for the folks that don't need it now, you can get more, and a lot more. And if you own your house, Sam, free and clear, which is 1/3 of all houses in the United States, you can get way more if you sell on seller financing. And I'll give you an example if you'd like.
Yeah.
On a $400,000 house, if you have no mortgage on a $400,000 property and you sell that on seller financing to a buyer, it can be me, it can be your neighbor, it can be whoever, and you charge 3% interest at 10% down, you're going to get paid $600,000 on that house over 30 years. Look at your truth in lending statement. When you sign a loan, you don't pay the sale price for the home. You pay compound interest, which is a beautiful thing. So that's when I say you can get more money later or less now. So you have the ability to wait, you can max out your house.
How does that work? So like, use my situation as an example. I've got a traditional loan, a maxed out, the traditional dollars in my area. We're a little bit higher income in the Denver area. Say I wanted to move. Do first mortgages, and I know we're getting a little bit technical here, but do first mortgages allow for a secondary mortgage behind them? What kind of gymnastics do you have to go through to get that approved, or do you even worry about getting it approved?
Sure. So we wouldn't, in your situation where you have a loan in place, we wouldn't use a second loan. We would agree upon a price to buy your house. If you wanted $600,000 for your house or whatever we agreed upon, we would agree upon that number and then a date out in the future where we would cash you out of the house, which is the difference, which is your equity position, whatever you owe on the loan today. There is no loan in place. Like, you as the seller have the ability to finance me or anyone else who wants to do this with. There's no reason for me to get a bank loan to pay off your bank loan. That's the way we approach it, right? The only people who get rich in that scenario are the banks. So what we're doing is locking in your equity. There are no fees or commissions, so you don't have to pay an agent. You don't have to pay 5 or 6%. As long as, Sam, you can wait for your equity, you'll get it at a later point in time. There's no reason to take out another loan. That first loan gets paid by me every month, or whoever your buyer is. Sure. Did I do a good job of explaining that? Yeah,
I appreciate that. That's helpful to just conceptualize what we're talking about here. So the perfect target, and a lot of our audience, to back up a little bit, a lot of our audience, they hear owner financing and they think, oh, I'm going to try to get a multifamily owner to go and do this for me. I want to buy on owner financing because that means it's going to be a better deal. But the reverse can also be true. And that's what we're talking about here, is changing it and looking at it probably more as an owner, although this strategy can certainly be flipped the other way and is commonly. But for those who don't need to sell a home, don't need that liquidation event now, and maybe for taxable reasons want to stagger it out into the future, you can do so, realize even more value on your home, and do so in a pretty efficient manner.
That's a great point. I don't mean to interrupt you here, but just for your listeners buying multifamily, there are plenty of mom and pop sellers out there that own apartment buildings free and clear, that for whether it's estate planning purposes or tax planning purposes, they don't want the lump sum. They'd rather do something on owner financing. And you'd be surprised when you start, going out, because now that I know how to do these deals, I can go out and target off-market multifamily deals if I choose to do so. I know how to talk to the sellers. I know how to find the properties. I know how to have the conversation. I know how to find motivation and solve problems. That's what this is all about. So you will find that a lot of, especially, smaller owners, mom and pop landlords that just want to get out of the landlord business, but love the cash flow, will prefer to do something like this, again, because of the tax benefits. And then because of the depreciation situation, right? And then they might want to help someone who wants to get into the business. I mean, I've had plenty of people like, hey, I've been doing this a long time. I just want to go down to Mexico and, work on my bar or whatever. I just want to be out of the landlord business, and you'd be surprised how much they want to help you. So I think there's a lot more people open to it than you'd think.
So everybody who's getting into real estate hears the phrase, you got to find your niche, There's so many different ways to make money in real estate. And you've stumbled upon, or not stumbled upon, you intentionally have driven towards one of those niches. But I'm curious, you said you started out trying to do multifamily syndication. And then you mentioned a deal mentor or somebody who mentored you to get into this business. What was that process like of figuring out, hey, maybe multifamily syndication isn't where I want to focus, and that opened the door to BKW?
Yeah. So and one of the things that got me into business was, and this, is mindset, right? The reason I never started a business is because my head was screwed on incorrectly. So once I fixed that, I was able to take the necessary action to get to the point where I was able to create deals, find deals. I knew I had it in me. I just needed some direction. So hiring a coach and a mentor was like the major needle mover for me, step number one. And I don't know what happens after we get out of school, Sam. We all just think we got it figured out and we don't need coaches anymore. And it's just a silly mistake. I did it for 25 years. I'll never not have a coach again. I have multiple coaches now. And step number one is invest in yourself, right? Before you can start creating the life of your dreams. So that was really how I was able to build this business, is I had someone that's done it before guiding me. Before I was trying to do it on my own. And that's why I never did anything, because I was too scared. Like, what if I mess this up? Like, there's too much at risk. Once I had somebody, in my hip pocket helping me if I had questions, it was so much easier. It was so much easier to take action and know that if I failed, I had somebody helping me.
Yeah. Well, I want to commend you. I mean, it's very rare that you see people who've hit mid-career or later and make such a drastic shift. I mean, obviously changing your mindset is the biggest part of that. Mm-hmm. But what was it that clicked in you that like, hey, I am going to go hire a coach? Because a lot of times those types of individuals, though they drive a tremendous amount of value, there's an upfront cost to that. And it requires almost dying to yourself and realizing and understanding and internalizing that I don't know everything. I need to go outside of myself to get to where I want to go. And a lot of us are just too comfortable where we're at or too scared to move forward. What helped you kickstart that process?
That's a great question. And I was certainly of the mindset that I did not need help. Like, I had it all figured out. And the older you get, the more stubborn you get, right? Like, I don't need I don't need anybody helping me, And it wasn't until I surrendered to that false truth that things started to move for me. I remember the moment vividly when I signed up for my coach. And again, it's not an insignificant amount of money. I just said to myself, I told my wife, I am not going to let myself limiting beliefs and my fears get in the way of my goals any longer. Like, I'm tired of it. It was a sick and tired of moment. Right. And I signed up for coaching. I remember right after that, and things started, and I surrendered. Like, I came in and said, okay, these guys have built something. They know what they're doing. Some of them are younger than me. And I'm just not going to come in with the mindset like I had before, like I know everything. Like, there's nothing for me to teach them. It's the complete opposite. And that was difficult for me because, like I said, I thought I had it all figured out. But that's something that we all have to do when we get into business, is surrender.
A lot of times I compare entrepreneurship to like building a Lego tower. You got to get your base. And so you got your base by going out and getting that education. Mm-hmm. But you have to get to a certain height before you start seeing results. You've got to put a brick a day. And often right before the breakthrough is the darkest moment where your tower's the tallest and there's still no results. There's still no ROI. What was that? Did you hit that moment? Does that ring true for you? What was that process like from when you started to when you actually saw success?
Yeah. That's a super awesome analogy. I love Legos as a kid, so we're aligned there. I would definitely want to ask you what your moment was too, because I'm curious. But for me, it was, I spent all this effort. Again, we're calling, right? Like, I'm calling sellers. I'm having conversations. So we're making all these phone calls, which isn't, my sales career helped me in that, because I wasn't afraid to talk to people. It was just a matter of knowing what to say. So I got a house under agreement. 71 days after I started calling sellers, I got a seller to give me their house. And I thought it was like I remember I screamed, right? And my wife said, well, what happened? What's going on? I just got a house. Yeah. I'm like, I've been making hundreds of calls. I got a house under agreement. She wasn't as enthusiastic as me, but I lost that house. So the seller ended up leasing it out from under me like 4 weeks later. And, there's that moment where it's like, hey, this is too hard. I'm going to quit. And then I got over that. And 2 weeks later, I got another house under agreement and ended up putting one of our buyers in the house like 4 weeks later. So that was my moment because I almost quit, but I got through it because I had people alongside of me helping me out. I'm curious to know what yours was.
Yeah, I think my moment was, so back in 2018, I was starting to try to get into apartment syndication. And this was before I'd met Whitney Sewell, partner at LifeBridge Capital now. And I told my wife, I'm a big New Year's guy. So I told my wife, hey, we're going to buy an apartment complex in 2018. And so I took a pretty sequential approach to it. I did not have a mentor at the time. I was doing everything self-taught and was just like, I need to know how to underwrite a deal. So I kind of went through the process, started teaching myself how to underwrite, looked at a ton of stuff on LoopNet. That's all garbage. And you're just trying to figure out why is it garbage. But probably the nadir for me was I found a project that I thought was the bee's knees. It was 64 units down in Colorado Springs, found it in April. So pretty early on relatively in the journey. It had been on the market for a year and a half. We submitted a price or an offer that was a little bit over his asking price. And then the seller ended up sitting on our offer for 7 weeks. And it was that intervening period of, hey, I did everything I know how to do. This was the best deal that's come along. That intervening 7 weeks, I'm looking at other deals. Nothing else is as good. I don't understand why this guy is not even responding to my offer. Am I paired with the wrong broker? Did I say something to offend the guy? You run through all those things. You've put forth all that effort. It was like working a second full-time job to pull this off. And then he ended up responding, had 2 terms that of course he wanted to bend in his direction. And we agreed and ended up getting that deal. And really, it was a home run of a first deal for us. We've since exited that. But
sweet.
Yeah, I think that intervening period was the most challenging, was my darkest before the dawn type moment.
Awesome. Great share. And LoopNet, you brought back memories.
There's a lot of purposes for LoopNet, but you're probably not going to buy a lot of things off of there. So
exactly.
Oh, man. So I'm curious, Bryan, you mentioned that you're cold calling people. I assume you're cold calling. You mentioned you're calling a lot of people. You started a business that it's all about the deal funnel. And I just would love for you to share with our audience how you think about the deal funnel, how you get stuff in, because it really is a numbers game. My background is in sales as well. And we know that generally, your close ratios, your appointment ratios. What metrics are you watching and just how do you conceptualize of your personal deal funnel?
Yeah. So we do cold call. I don't do as much calling now. I have a team of VAs that are calling for me. I make a lot of second level calls, but yeah, it is a numbers game and you must, any investor out there, you have to track your metrics. What you track measures and improves, period, end of story. If you're not paying attention to it, how do you know what you're doing if you're not tracking your numbers? So what we really look at, and we're doing a lot of different things. We're typically talking to people who are actively trying to sell their house. Like there needs to be motivation. A seller to sell on terms needs to have motivation. So we're looking at expired listings for sale by owners, for rent by owner. And then we do targeted lists. I mean, there's a lot of tired landlords, a lot. Because their houses or their renters went into default. We look at absentee out-of-state owners is always a great list to call. So you can do, you want to make sure that you have multiple sources that you're targeting, that you're calling from. And the key is to, and I don't know if anyone is going to be able to see this, but you got to have a funnel, right? The funnel. So top of funnel is always important. We get a lot of no's. We get a lot of no's, but we make sure we're following up, because a no now in 30 days or 90 days could be a resounding yes. I couldn't sell my house. I had to lower it 5 price drops. So we look at conversions. So we pay a lot of attention to the people that we're talking to, converting them to a lead, defining what a lead is. And that's anyone who's open to the idea. They don't have to be a yes. It's like, hey, would you consider us as a plan B? Yes. And then we make sure that our follow-up system is in place. Because I'll give you a statistic that I learned from a great marketer who does wholesaling. She does all mailings. She told me that 80% of your deals are going to come at or beyond the 5th attempt. 80% of your deals at or after the 5th attempt. 90% of your competition will quit after the 3rd try. So simply just by having a great follow-up system and tracking your metrics, you're going to beat out everyone else.
What software tool, if any, do you use to keep track of follow-ups as a CRM or workflow manager or anything like that?
Yeah, I use a couple. So for day-to-day operation, we use a tool called FreedomSoft, which is a CRM, but you can also pull lists. You can pull specific lists and you can do comps. I mean, it's kind of an all-in-one tool. FreedomSoft, it's a great tool. I do use PropStream. I do have that for, again, pulling specific data on houses, looking at comps. And that's really it. Those are the only two CRM tools that I use. And I also use PropStream to mail postcards and various campaigns.
Oh, that's fantastic. Mm-hmm. Beyond your mentor at this point, and as we're wrapping up here, I'm curious, what would be the one thing that you would attribute your success to?
Yeah, wow. I am trying not to be humble here, but my family, really. I mean, my wife has been super, super supportive of me. I tell this story often, that convincing my wife, talking to her about what we were going to invest in coaching, which again was not insignificant, was one of the best sales pitches I've ever given. I mean, I was on the whiteboard. I was like, here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to pay it back. Here's our return. But at the end of the day, she's been super supportive. So, and that has driven me. Like, I never forget about that. It's like, she committed to me, I'm committed to her. So it was really my family that got me over the hump.
Oh, that's fantastic. It's fun to look back on those initial investments, especially like in coaching, and think, mm-hmm. I mean, you've probably 50, 75, 100x your initial investment or beyond.
Oh, easily. And then just from like your network, I mean, your inner network. I mean, you're the average of the 5 people you hang around with. Well, those 5 people look way different than they did 5-6 years ago. Way different.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, Bryan, really appreciate you joining the show today. I think there's a lot of stuff in here that listeners could pull value from. If folks want to reach out to you, learn more about what you're doing, pick your brain, or even work with you to buy or sell a home in the greater Chicagoland area, how can they reach out to you?
Yeah. And I love to talk about people who are looking to, get into this or are interested in it, because it's a new concept to a lot of people. They don't understand it. So if you ever want to talk, I can give you some great resources. Email me, Bryan, Brian at BKWPropertySolutions.com. I'm happy to talk with you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Bryan, for joining us. Thank you to our audience. This has been another episode of the Real Estate Syndication Show. I'm your host, Sam Rust, signing off.
Thank you for being a loyal listener of the show. Please subscribe and share it with your friends. We want to help you become the passive investor you've always wanted to become, but also the operator you've always wanted to become. We want to be the #1 resource for your real estate investing journey. But go to lifebridgecapital.com where you can start investing in real estate today.